You're listening to the podcast that changed the game and rocked an entire profession. Talking about shit in law enforcement that keeps poor leaders up at night. When others run scared and hide behind fake policies, the Roll Call Room podcast tells it like it is. No bullshit. No matter how hard these thieves try, we keep killing it. And now, here are your hosts, Nick and Mark.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Roll Call Room. I am one of your hosts, Nick. With me is the Ayatollah of the New Republic of Iran, Mark the Cop. What's up, buddy?
Welcome, everyone. We are in studio here at the RCR Studios in bright and beautiful, sunny Florida. My drive over this morning was less, I don't want to say hectic, but frustrating at best. Remember, guys, when you come down here and the time the snowbirds are here, remember is don't get hurt. Okay, and if you're in a multi-lane highway like 27 on the way down, always go in the middle lane. Don't drive in the left lane. Don't drive in the right lane. In the middle if you want to make the best time. So there you go.
Good advice. Central Florida sucks during this time because you have vacationers and snowbirds. And
yeah, you're in the happiest place on earth. So over on the West Coast, we just have snowbirds. And rednecks.
So, folks, Mark and I, as you can see from before, we're in the same studio again.
Mm-hmm.
Always love us being in the same studio because the logistics are so much easier with sound. So you want to start a podcast. Excited to have you here. I'm more excited to have our very special guest on, Travis Yates.
Oh, my gosh.
A big fan and friend of the show. Travis came on year one. I think actually he was our first ever guest, and I was fanboying because I had just read his book, and I was like, his book changed my whole perspective, and my book I wouldn't have even started my book if it wasn't for The Awakening. But I'm going to save that for when he comes on because I know how much he loves to hear that.
Do we want to name it?
His book?
Yeah.
Go for it. We're going to name it 15 times.
It's The Courageous Police Leader. Likewise, it was just absolutely an amazing book. And ironically enough, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but he wrote down 2017 he said?
Yeah.
Sorry. And then actually published 3 years later, I believe. Came out in 2020. But as soon as I got it, I was still working, read it front to back, and I went, oh my God. It's just like finding RCR for the first time. You're like, oh my God. I'm not the only one.
Yep.
And I think that in that era is when the change started.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're in another revolution or change. I think that the cream is rising back to the top, to use a Macho Man Randy Savage. But I think a lot of the time, so, these guys fake it till they make it. When they become Carl Wayne, they can't survive, and they're starting to fall apart. So thankfully, a lot of these guys are finding their retirement, finding jobs. But I was super excited when Dr. Yates was on. Can't wait to talk to him.
Yeah. One thing with his book is, like you said, it's timeless. Like you can read it 5 years from now and it'll still be the same problem that it was in 2017.
Yes.
And I tried to emulate that with Police Mental Barricade, because if you read that in 2019 and then you read it today, if you're struggling with mental health, it's going to make no difference. I almost felt like it was a continuation of Travis's book. Travis set it up with the problems in leadership, and then I continued it with, and it wasn't my plan. Like I didn't think about that when I wrote it.
Right.
But they do coincide with each other because it's this is what happens with law enforcement leadership or leadership in general. I mean, you can say that for the military as well. And then these are the ripple effects or the collateral damage of the things that you're doing to the troops.
Right.
He was very courageous himself for writing that, because at the time he was a major in the Tulsa Police Department.
Right.
And I can only imagine the blowback that he got when that book came out. I can only imagine.
Well, being a fanboy Jesus, that's kind of sparks so many different things and similarities. And I think a lot of you out there that are working have experienced the same thing. He travels all over lecturing and teaching. And when I was in Ohio, he came into the Ohio Police Officers Training Academy and wrote a really wonderful article on Police One. But what I didn't know at the time was he had to take his personal time to go do those lectures and teaching. And him and I were talking face to face one time. It was after, I don't know when it was. It was in a hallway somewhere. And at an event, he says, I teach everybody but my own people. And my jaw kind of dropped. And I went, what? And he's like, oh, yeah. I teach everybody but my own, because my management stopped me from instructing our people, but yet I can go across the nation and teach others. And it was kind of reflective of what, I experienced in my life with my agency. Although I kept being a primary, you just start seeing those responsibilities start being eroded away. And I hear that time and time again. There's a colleague of mine that works for a larger department. I'll call him out because he's still working. But same thing, he's an advanced driving instructor. He was on the team over there and was strictly forbidden from teaching his own people, which I think is ridiculous. But again, that's what happens when you get egos involved.
Yep.
Instead of saying, oh, wait a minute, I have an absolute subject matter expert on my staff. Let's put him to work. No, you've pissed me off. You didn't kiss the ring, or you're not working the taint, or whatever you're doing.
It's kiss the ring, man. You said it right on, because I heard that term. I heard that term when they were coming down on me about this podcast. I heard that was the first time I heard the kiss the ring thing, which is so odd because coming from the NYPD, I would have thought I would have heard that. And it must be like a Southern thing, like past the Mason-Dixon line. Because in New York, they just turn around and say, you just refuse to suck commander's dick, and that's why you're not going to get ahead. It was plain like that. It's interesting because that's what I heard multiple times, which was, the reason why you're in trouble for that podcast is you didn't go up to the top floor, to the ivory tower, and go kiss the ring and ask for permission. And where I went wrong, and not really wrong, was my message was, who the fuck are you to tell me what I can do on duty? And that's the worst thing you can do.
I got this thing called the First Amendment.
Yeah.
I got free speech. No, you don't. You can't talk the way you want to. You have to watch what you do off duty. Then they say it's a lifestyle being in law enforcement, and it is.
Yeah.
However, I think that at times, they're writing these policies that are so restrictive that, you should be conscious of your off-duty conduct. And I get that to a certain extent, but when is enough?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I think social media is kind of changing a little bit of that. I think it's actually making it worse. It's not making a really good argument for officers to be able to have social media public or do podcasts and stuff. I mean, that's the reason why a lot of the podcasts, and we're beating a dead horse here, but this is the reason why a lot of these podcasts that pop up. The first question I ask, and you and I had this conversation via text, I get a tremendous amount of people that are like, I want to come on the show, I'd be a great guest. And I don't doubt that you would be a great guest. I really don't doubt it. But I always do the same thing, which is I caution you, if you're still on the job, that's the first question I ask. Are you still on the job? And they go, oh, yeah, my chief's totally cool with it.
Yeah, yes.
I'm gonna caution you because mine was cool with it for about 5 episodes before I was, in a box answering theft allegations. And so the other part is, you might be a funny person, you might be a jovial person, you might be a good person for content when you're car to car and it's 3:00 in the morning and everybody's sleep deprived. But then you come on the show, and I've had this. I've had guests come on where it's just like it's an
Hey, McFly.
yeah. I mean, it seems easy to do. And if you ask some of the TikTok comments and the Instagram comments, you and I are just two dumb fucks that don't know what the fuck we're talking about. All fucks.
Yeah.
We have a
Stormtrooper mask is all I need to see. We need to. We should dedicate an entire show to the troll call.
Dude, I gotta
do 30 minutes on the troll call because you have been out there with a bellows in the phone.
Dude, it's a full-time job answering these trolls. And you know what I learned? I learned that the comment, your liberal tears taste so good, really triggers them. They don't like that, bro.
It's funny, the ones that seem to be grandstanding the most, I go look at their profile, there's like nothing. There's no, they have no friends. It's strictly trolls.
Oh, totally.
They're, and at one point in my life, and I really still think this, that, these people are being paid, to go click hashtags and comment. I think that's all they do. Somewhere there's a boiler, it's like the old call centers, and somewhere there's a boiler room where there's people sat in there with a bunch of laptops commenting. And then you go look at where they're from, well, they're all from overseas. I very rarely do I see where there's people actually from America that are family people that put themselves out there that like, no, I disagree with this. So
I'll tell you this. I have either been very, very naive. I think that's the case because for the longest time I wasn't into politics. I could go, I can vote either way. But the raid on Trump and that kind of stuff really changed my opinion, and we've already discussed why that changed. Your opinion and my opinion. I'd almost say that I leaned more Democrat than I did Republican from 18 to about like 44 years old.
They started to see how much tax you were paying.
Right. And I guess I was naive because some of the comments, like I'll open up the comment section and I'll literally read every single comment. And some of these people's arguments, I'm very, very concerned about their mental health. And I don't mean that to be funny, although it is funny. I'm very, very concerned with the amount of TDS that I see out there. It's bonkers, the rationale and the regurgitation of CNN and CBS. Like the amount of people that clip articles from BBC and from CBS.
Oh, wait a minute. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
I didn't think it was that show.
It baffles my mind because they read this stuff and then they're like, that's gospel. That's gospel. Even though 3 million pages of the Epstein file is out, you had Bill Clinton testifying the other day that fucking Epstein was his best friend. Said never heard about Trump going to Epstein Island, never heard about this. Did Trump like going after younger women, not below 18 years old? Absolutely. Was he known as a womanizer? Absolutely. If you didn't know Trump in the 80s and the 90s, that dude was a stud. And I don't mean a stud.
Walking biohazard.
Yeah. And I don't mean stud like fucking like handsome.
Right.
The dude had worse eyebrows than I had.
Oh yeah.
And this dude, he was.
I mean, it was.
Yeah, oh, dude, it's my staple.
Nick Brezhnev.
Yeah, Oscar the Grouch.
Yeah.
But it baffles my mind, dude. Like, if you're living in that delusional now, the other part is I was having this conversation with a friend of mine that lives in Canada, Shout out to Evan. So he can't stand Trump, and I get it. And I said to him, make no mistake about it. I'm not a blanket. I'm not a blanket. I love everything the guy does.
Right.
There are things that he does that really, really irk me. There are things that he does that are very unpresidential. There's things that he does that I think is going to cost us the House and or the Senate this year. And it really, really irritates me because this should be a home run in November, and it's not going to be.
It should be.
Right. And it's not going to be.
But I don't know. I think what was the State of the Nation there? The speech he had the other night when he challenged them all, and they all sat on their hands and their asses. And I thought, that's pointing to that pretty good. When he says, who's in support of Americans and not illegals, and they all stayed on their asses and everyone else stood up. So that
he set them up, dude.
Oh yeah, and it made a very clear and distinct line.
Like so, I forgot where I read it, but somebody was saying that is $1 billion ad for the midterms. That whole incident. And we'll have to do that on a show. We'll have to discuss the State of the Union. Actually, you know what? That's going to be our topic for the episode after this one.
Right.
But what I do want to do is folks stick around because we're going to have Travis Yates on next before Mark and I get into a tangent, and then Travis logs on. But stick around, folks, and
that's what happened with Iceman. Glad he had his pants on.
Yeah, stick around and hope you enjoy this interview because it was really awesome. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. And as promised, we have the Travis Yates with us today. Travis, thank you so much for coming back. I think this is your third or fourth appearance on Roll Call Room.
However many it is, it's not enough, gentlemen. It's great to be back.
I know it is. I know. I blame all of it on.
Yeah.
If I'm not losing co-hosts, I don't know what's going on. But welcome back, man. You were on our buddy's podcast, Spinning Our Gears podcast, and really knocked it out of the park. And really things that we wanted to continue to keep talking about.
Yes.
So without further ado, let's go right into the last time that you were on the show. We talked about consent decrees. We talked about, how I forgot what the department was that was fighting the consent decree. Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
Give us a little bit of an update of consent decrees. We're in a different administration now, so I don't think that's their knee-jerk reaction anymore.
You talk about one of the most cowardly, weakest items that police leaders have failed on in the last 30 years. It's consent decrees. Just to give your audience a quick background, because not everybody knows it, because that's one way these scumbags win. Is it's such a complicated issue. They sort of just hide those facts, right? So Congress gave the Department of Justice authority in 1994 under the Cops Bill, and we generally liked that bill because it put 100,000 cops on the street. It was it brought crime to record low in the 90s, and we all call that racist now. But at the time, the entire Black Congressional Caucus supported it because of all the deaths of young Black men that were happening in our urban cities, and it worked. I mean, you put more cops on the street and violence comes down. It's a shocking statistic, I know, for some people to understand. But part of that is they implemented an accountability feature in that where the Department of Justice can investigate local law enforcement for civil rights violations. And it may have started with good intentions, but as most things in the federal government happen, as time went on, it just became this beast and a monster that started making cities worse. And there's been some peer-reviewed studies on this that sort of explain that, and they kind of come to this conclusion because the academics love to say this is, we just don't understand why crime is increasing and departments are being depleted because this is both. So I worked in law enforcement this entire time. I started in 93, decrees happened in 94, and I watched this in my career, and I didn't think much of it because this is used as a political tool. They mainly would come to large urban cities ran by Democrats because Democrats would just say, yes, please, federal government, take over my police department. And they would have chiefs that would do the same thing, which is the weakest thing ever. So if your department has problems, you have a person to fix problems. It's called a police chief. But these police chiefs, they love to just sort of, oh yeah, let the government take over. Now, the dirty little secret is there's a segment in the police chief world where they get very successful if they use the federal government. They get to retire, they become consultants, they work as consent decree monitors, they make a lot of money. It's just really dirty. And no one could make an argument that it ever helped, even in the early days. But what I started seeing 20 years ago is every city they went to, the cities became just a complete mess. I mean, we're talking New Orleans, violent crime rate went up 100%. Every single city that did this, every metric that you would try to gauge success under was just completely messed up. And, we don't have time to go into all that. I'll give some folks a link a little bit later to see that. But I was always, and what really shocked me is the agreement the cities would make. So if the federal government goes anywhere, whether it's a local business or whether it's a police department or a government entity, and they say, you have done this, you get to say, well, I don't agree with that. Like, we're going to go to court and we're going to debate this and we'll let a judge decide. No police department had ever done that. They always just said, okay, we'll take it. Well, here's the problem when they take it. There's no incentive for a city to ever get out of consent decree. Consent decree monitors start at $1 million a year. They're mainly lawyers out of Washington, D.C. They don't even live in the city. And they basically write 4 reports a year, quarterly reports to a federal judge saying whether they're in compliance, whatever that means, right? You've changed your policy to this, or you mandated this bureaucracy, this paperwork. And it's just a mess when you read them. And so you would have these cities under consent decrees for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And they're just spending millions every year to just comply. And so that's why the crime would get out of control, because they're no longer doing police work, they're doing paperwork. And it was just dirty. And so obviously no one could make an argument that it worked. It didn't bring crime down. It didn't do anything that it said it would do. It just created a mess. But it always bothered me. And I got a phone call, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and it was from representatives of the Phoenix Police Department. And I want to be very careful about who these individuals were, because some of them still work at the department. But they said, hey, we're here and we'd like to talk to you about our investigation. Now, Phoenix had agreed to go under investigation by the DOJ. It was actually the longest investigation in consent decree history. They investigated them for over 3 years. And the police department actually spent $10 million to help the DOJ investigate them. Now, you wonder, why would any department do that? Once again, it's politics. I didn't have to ask them, but the DOJ is so weak when they investigate, they have to have everybody in agreement. They only go into cities where the chief has been pre-selected to agree with them. And at the time, Phoenix had an interim police chief. And now tell me if this matches, gentlemen. This interim police chief was a major in Baltimore. Oh, they were under consent decree. Before that, he was a major in Louisville. Oh, yeah, they were under a DOJ investigation. I'm sorry, his career was in Louisville. He then got hired as head of the consent decree in Baltimore. We all know how wonderful that city is, right? Then he leaves that over a consent decree in Baltimore to become an interim police chief in one of the major cities in America. Odd, right? Well, here's why. He's in on it, right?
Yeah.
And I better say allegedly, because these weak scumbags love to sue you if you tell the truth.
Absolutely.
And he also had an associate, a lawyer, that he immediately put on $1 million retainer to help his city in Phoenix navigate this. So everyone's making money, right? And they stood up a unit to just participate and help the DOJ and basically the DOJ grabbed 5 years of all body cams and reports and everything, and they're looking at everything. Now, gentlemen, if you look at any major police department, I mean, I think Phoenix was 3 or 4 million citizen contacts a year. I mean, calls alone. I mean, so you look at 15, 20, 25 million citizen contacts, you're probably going to find a few things. That's why before the DOJ can do anything, it has to be a pattern or practice. That means a regular practice to violate people's rights. And so I was contacted in the middle of this investigation because people were looking at this going, man, this doesn't seem right. And they were going to some of the leaders there in Phoenix and going, this isn't right. And they figured out real quick they were in on it, that they wanted the consent decree. Now, Phoenix is it's basically a 60-40 city that leans left. And what these consent decrees are, it's a way for these politicians to go, we're doing something about it, right? The federal government's here to help. And of course, you look at the history of it, it's a disaster. Well, they had looked at the history of it and they had seen this. And so that I'd written some things about it through the years. And crazy enough, why am I the one talking about it? We've got FOPs and PERFs where all East Coast chiefs go to die. And all these organizations that say they're for us, no one is taking a look at it. Come to find out, the ICP gets much of their funding from the Department of Justice. And so it's just this ugly, smelly thing.
It's interesting that you say that, because we did an episode last year and then we just did an updated one on their tax returns. And I have never seen so much hate.
How disgusting is that? They're in bed with our enemies, Nick. They're in bed with people that hate us.
Travis, my LinkedIn was off the charts with the amount of FBI agents looking at my LinkedIn. All these people that come from IACP, they were not happy about us, like looking at where they get their funding from, how much money they make from those conventions. All these different
directors
things.
making crazy amount of money and just
bonus.
Nuts.
Bonus alone was
Meanwhile, they're telling law enforcement the very things that are getting law enforcement killed, and we'll get to that later today.
Yeah.
So basically, what I assisted the union with in Phoenix is we set up a website, savephx.com, and we put all the historical facts of consent decrees. And it's not hard. You run a Google search and all these cities are going, this is out of control. We can't get out of this. Our crime's out of control. We're losing all. I mean, you name the cities, Seattle, New York, every city you'll never go on a vacation at because you're scared for your safety are cities under consent decree. 7 of the top 10 most violent cities ran by the federal government. It's just disgusting. And so we just put that website up, and what happened was the citizens in Phoenix who were being lied to by the local media, because the media loves this sort of stuff, right? They ran 3 years of hit pieces on the Phoenix Police Department because obviously they're racist because the DOJ's in town. Right. And it got enough citizens involved to talk to their politicians, for the politicians to go, oh man, we better be careful here. Now they wanted to sign off on it, I have no doubt, because this is what happened in Oakland. Oakland signed off on it, and then 10, 15 years later, when the city is about to be bankrupt and out of control, the citizens go, why are we under this consent decree? Things are much worse. And the politicians get to go, we had no idea this would happen. They promised us this. Well, we put the Phoenix politicians in a position to where they couldn't do that because we had informed the public so well. And that website's still up. It's historical. You can go to savephx.com and read that, and you can see how compelling it was. Because we did just, we posted like peer-reviewed research and like interviews from former cities that had been under this, and it was a disaster. Well, that was enough for the politicians. So the DOJ got done with their investigation. They did what they did everywhere. They came to the decision makers in the city, because it's not a vote of the public or anything. The decision makers in Phoenix were the city councilor, this council led, and they said, what we found was bad, really bad, but we can help you. All you have to do is sign here, and we will take over your police department. A federal judge will monitor it, and we'll make you better. Yeah. Well, we had done enough to where they went, I don't disagree with you, but we'd like to see the results of your investigation. Keep in mind, the city of Phoenix spent over $10 million to help them with their investigation. We'd like to see the results. And the DOJ said, this is at the end of the Biden administration. They said, we don't do that. What do you mean? You want us to sign this bottom line that we're going to be spending millions a year for 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and you won't let us see what you found? I mean, no one would sign a document. You wouldn't buy a house or a car without inspecting that, right? Right. And so they asked him a couple of times and they said no. So finally they said, we can't sign it until we see the investigation. So the DOJ did what they always do. They said, well, we're going to come out with this investigation publicly, and we're going to completely blast your police department. You can avoid that, of course, if you just sign this. And the politicians held firm. And so sure enough, the DOJ did a national press conference, and they announced there were 134 incidents in the city of Phoenix over 5 years that is just discriminatory and racist. And there were, from homeless people to everybody, they were just being juvenile. It was the longest consent decree I'd ever seen, the most instances I've ever seen. They were really mad that they just didn't get agreement. And when you read this consent decree, and it's all online, it's like they all read. You read like they'll give you like a little 134 incidents, and it'll be like a paragraph on each incident. And you read the paragraph, and you're always going, "Is there something else I'm missing here?" And I'll tell you why that. So somehow the city council made the decision for the first time ever to put on a public website the details of every incident. So right now you could go to a public website and it shows on what the DOJ said. And then on the other side, it shows the body camera footage and all the reports and all the investigation and everything. And so we had for the first time able to actually look and see whether the DOJ was being honest or whatever. Now, it's crazy to say that because no department had ever taken them to court, because that's where that would come out in. And I have a theory on why the DOJ would press so hard not to go to court, because what they're doing is a violation of the Constitution. The 10th Amendment prohibits the federal government from running a local police department. The only way you can do that is if the local police department says, yes, we volunteer to let you do that, right? You can volunteer to give up your constitutional rights.
Yeah.
And I think the DOJ knew that if this ever went to court, that would get exposed, and this law would get thrown out completely. And this is all about power and control. So I spent a summer, 3 months, going through every incident and evaluating it. And I had other researchers do that, PhD types. And I thought I would find some holes in it. I think I'm like everybody else. You covered that there's probably something not right. I had no idea what I found. In fact, I wish I wouldn't have found it so bad, because it's almost not believable, although no one's been able to expose it. You can go to lawofficer.com/DOJ, and you can read that research. They lied 97% of the time. Flat out, they lied. They weren't honest. And let me tell you how they did it. They would say something like, this officer shot this guy for no reason. He was just experiencing a mental health crisis, and then they just shot him, violated his rights. Well, they failed to mention the guy was trying to stab a cop in their narrative. So they did this on almost every incident. Then they would actually get constitutional guidelines wrong. Like they clearly don't understand Graham v. Connor. They misrepresented it. In fact, they had a whole section about juvenile arrests and how they were all violations of civil rights. And here's why. Homeless arrests. All these homeless people were being arrested. Now, the Phoenix Police Department actually didn't want to arrest a bunch of homeless people for trespassing and public drunk, but the business owners got so mad they filed a lawsuit to force the Phoenix Police Department to actually enforce the law.
And do something.
After that lawsuit, they started, business would call, this guy's trespassing, they would go write the guy a ticket or take him to jail. And so the DOJ made a big deal about that's violation of rights. And they cited the local ordinance that was unconstitutional. Now, wait a minute. No judge made the ordinance unconstitutional. In fact, the Supreme Court issued a ruling saying local jurisdictions can pass laws that may disproportionately affect homeless people, like loitering and public drunk, because that's for public order. So they literally ignored a U.S. Supreme Court law and just, in their opinion, said this local law is unconstitutional. The DOJ doesn't get to decide it. So they did stuff like this all throughout. And I thought this would be huge. I go, okay, you got all these organizations that are for this. You got all these chiefs through the years that have been for this. All these people making all this money. We just discovered the highest law enforcement agency in the land, the Department of Justice, lied or misrepresented or took out of context 97% of the incidents. Gentlemen, there were officers that were fired for doing something, and they would use that as an example of how the department's wrong. I'm like, there were officers that actually shouldn't have been fired that were fired for legal uses of force, but it looked bad, and the woke chief or whatever fired him anyway against the recommendation chain of command. So you've got an agency that's doing all these. I mean, they used examples, and I would consider anybody. I did some videos on this. They used examples that were like heroic stuff, like the textbook tactics. I mean, there was one example they used where this guy had a knife with a baby back in a back room, a domestic. And they used less lethal to separate him from the kid and ran in there and saved the kid and took him in custody. Nobody hurt. They used that as an example of unconstitutional policing. It was so insane. I couldn't believe it. But what was even more insane is nobody cared. The local media wouldn't touch it, right? No,
of course not.
We went to Congress, to the Republicans who are now in power, and they said, you have to get rid of this law. Because if a police officer lied 10% of the time, you'd fire him and bring charges and Brady him, giglio him. And the Republicans, in no unknown terms, said, we know there's inherent problems, but we're not going to get rid of it, because when we're in power, we want to have the carrot as well. And so so thankfully President Trump, 2 days after the report dropped, pulled every consent decree back across America. Right. That was still being investigated, on the verge of being signed. He pulled all that back. He pulled all the investigations back. But unfortunately, they're here. Like, as soon as the Democrat gets back in office, they'll rally it back up, and we can just really shame any department that looks at this seriously. This is such a joke. It's so crazy what this has done to law enforcement, and now we've caught them red-handed. There's no recovering to that. Like, it's not like, well, we made a few mistakes, we'll try to. No, you lied 97% of the time. You defamed a police department. I think there's actually grounds for the city of Phoenix to sue the Department of Justice for defamation and what they did. Now, that city's not going to do that. But here's the crazy part, gentlemen. The chief that was the interim chief that was there at Phoenix, that didn't say a peep during the investigation, didn't say a peep when he found out that 97% of his department was lied about, his good men. I mean, they were naming names in this document. Didn't say a peep. He then gets selected to be the Capitol Police Chief. And from what I understand, he told the Republicans in charge that he's the reason the Phoenix Police Department was able to not comply. You know, he sort of took the anti-deal. So I guess I helped the guy get a really sweet job. But what a travesty that we actually reward leaders that permit this. And you'll say, well, he could have at any moment, as chief, said, get out of my city. If you think we have a problem here, you can file a lawsuit and you can get the records that way. But we're not going to participate in this shit show that you're doing to our city, because you've ruined New Orleans, you've ruined Chicago, you've ruined Oakland, you've ruined Seattle, and I could go on and on. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But he didn't. He participated, spent millions of dollars to help them, and then ran out of town at the end because he was, by the way, he didn't get his contract renewed. They were getting rid of him because of all this stuff, and found a job at the Capitol Police Department. So it's kind of a long story, but it's about as short as I can tell it. It's really insane. If people want to dive into that, I would recommend you go, because you're not going to believe it when you read it. Lawster.com/DLJ, and you're going to lose your mind, because it talks about all of the money and all the screwed up cities. We have quotes from these cities that are saying how they're never going to recover from this. This is a generational problem. I mean, you never recover from this, and our own government did it to us.
Yeah. Right. Well, you touch on something that, like, I mean, we talked about it last time you were on, and I think we talk about it all the time, is these chiefs get passed around like a peace pipe. You know, they're in, you know, Alexandria, Virginia one year, and then they're over in Texas another year, and then they're in Colorado another year, and they just move around. So their ideology moves around with them. And when you look at like sanctuary cities, you have these police chiefs that stand in front of a podium and are telling their folks, don't cooperate. You know, you had a police chief that was about to fire 2 officers for calling ICE to come pick up suspects that had ICE detainers on them. And then he kind of came back a little bit because he got so much backlash. You were going to fire 2 officers. But talking about sanctuary cities, what are you seeing out there? What are you hearing as far as the poor knuckle draggers that are caught in the middle of this between the political police chiefs and the politicians, and keeping the public safe and honoring the oath that they took? I know for myself, I worked in a sanctuary city, and depending on who was the president, determined how badly it fucking sucked. You know, you weren't allowed to call if they had an ICE detainer, and if you did, you got written up. So what are you hearing? What are you seeing out there? What are the things that are really kind of glaring out at you?
Well, it's not just the sanctuary cities. It's the cops are doing their job and arresting violent criminals, and they're back out on the streets the very next day, or charges are dropped. And, you know, I think they found out that defunding the police, saying that it's not good politically. I mean, what idiot would think it would be? And so now they don't say it, but they do it through their policy and their decisions, right? So how do you defund it? Well, you defame it, and you make people quit in record numbers. You create a morale issue. You you create recruiting issues where nobody wants to do the job, because who would? If an accountant went to work and they were screamed at all day and they were getting disciplined for actually doing their job and following policy procedures, you never have any accountants. So we're seeing that in a lot of our major cities, and this whole consent decree and sanctuary cities, and I mean, these same chiefs are literally bringing criminal charges against officers that are following policies and procedures. We're seeing that across the country. And so those departments will never probably recover ever, because I could never trust them again. I mean, gentlemen, we still have chiefs that after George Floyd died, and by the way, we know so much more about that today because of, I don't know, the one journalist, Liz Collin, that did some stuff on it, where, you know, all these chiefs around the country wrote all these letters and social media posts, which is weird to me. You know, last time I checked, school teachers rape a lot of kids around the country, but, you know, even though we see that in the news a lot, we don't have every superintendent coming out every time it happens going, oh, we're so sorry and we won't happen. But these police chiefs are so weak, they feel like if something happened 2,000 miles away, they have to make a comment about it. That's still online. That entire incident was a lie from the very beginning. We know that now. If you have to be an idiot, I mean, get rid of your emotion. You'd have to be an idiot to not read the Minnesota policy and the Minnesota training. And I mean, it was such a con job to uproot the world during that time period that these chiefs, those letters are still out there. So if you're working for that chief, if they're doing that to something that didn't even happen in your city, what do you think they would do to you in your city, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of fortunately, I don't think these chiefs are the majority, because these are mainly in larger cities, sometimes even mid-sized cities, and most departments are smaller. But boy, it's destructive. It certainly is. And so I think the illegal immigration thing is so insane, because there is truth that when you ship 8% of Venezuelans to America, they're not shipping the best and brightest. That's actually true. And we saw this crime drop, you know, these early numbers, we saw this violent crime drop. It's hard to understand how it's not part of the illegal immigration that ICE is doing. How do you not? I mean, when you get a significant drop, and I'm an academia and I wouldn't recommend it for anybody, but one thing that I do know is if you get something that significantly drops, not just a little bit, but significantly, you better find a root cause. I find it very odd that no one is trying to find the root cause. It just happened. We just had a 20% reduction in murders, but we don't really know why. Well, I guess what has changed in the last year? Oh, that's right. We're shipping a lot of these criminals out of this country. And so it's hard to think of it. So I would say to me, it's a crazy stance that you're fighting so hard for illegal immigrants that broke the law when they came here, and you're using all that. There must be a reason for it. I think we all know the reason for it, you know, congressional seats or politics or votes. But the destruction that it does, I think, to some of these communities, I mean.
It distracts them. So, yeah. I think here in the roll call room, we're going to start registering them all as Republicans.
Well, the Democrats better be careful, because if you remember, they had this big, they were doing this down in Texas, right? Because they thought the Hispanics would all vote for them. Then they found out, oh, crap, we're not getting all these Hispanic votes like we thought. And so, so now you're seeing some different games being played.
Yeah.
So, Travis, let's talk about City of Cleveland. It's trying to end their consent decree, and it looks like they got a judge up there that's preventing it. So they've been under consent decree since 2015.
What city was that again, Mark? I'm sorry.
Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah.
So looks like I would just
let me tell you something. I was in Cleveland about the time that consent decree dropped, and I was teaching a seminar, and this officer came up to me at the break, and he was like, "Have you seen our consent decree?" Now, when you read one of them, you've read them all, right? But I had browsed through it. I said, "Yeah, I have." He goes, "Do you know I'm in the consent decree?" And I'm thinking to myself, "No, bro, I didn't take names and come to the check box." And of course, he goes, "Do you want to hear the story?" And I don't think I was going to get out of this story, because he clearly wanted to tell me the story. I said, "Well, tell me the story." Now, this story is just like Phoenix, right? Because we caught them in Phoenix. They were doing this everywhere. You don't just start off lying 97% of the time, right? So he said, "Yeah, man." He said, "Me and my partner got a call of a naked man in a grocery store that was out of control. He's on PCP." He said, "So, shocker, there were no other officers to help us. So we show up at the grocery store. This guy was so scary, the entire grocery store everyone had fled. And this guy was in the middle of the cereal aisle, just throwing stuff, completely naked, right? This is the call no one wants to be on. So they kind of come up with this game plan, like, okay, I'll distract him, and then you start tasing him, and then we'll get him handcuffed." And that's exactly what they did. I think they had to tase him 4 times, and they got him handcuffed. He's not hurt. Wow. No one's hurt. they use that as an example of you should not tase people more than twice. That's a violation of people's civil rights. So this guy was telling me that story. So yeah, I mean, the people in Cleveland just need to know that you were scammed. And here's the crazy part, Mark. What I found in Phoenix, these police chiefs know it's there. Like if you're a police chief in Cleveland at the time, and they have a different chief now, but if you're a police chief in Cleveland and you see the DOJ report, you have access to all those files. You know they're not telling the truth. Why aren't you saying something? Why are you just taking this, right? I may make the mayor mad, or who cares? This is your city on the line, and the last I checked, Cleveland's crime rate hasn't exactly been superb since 2015. They went downhill, and you can look at all those metrics.
Yeah, but I think you spoke about it before, which is a lot of them don't speak up because it's job security for what you got, and it's job security for the future. Because if you make waves, it's kind of like being maybe two guys that start a podcast while they're still police officers. Pretty stupid, but it happens. You don't want to rock the boat too much, and I'm not defending them at all. I'm just giving an example.
No, it's self-preservation, right?
Oh, it totally is, because
we're talking about managers, not leaders. I mean, if you're a manager, you're going to self-preserve no matter what.
Yeah, and your book, your intro to this interview, Mark and I were talking about your book and how it's timeless. It's stapled in time, where you can read it 5 years from now, and everything that you wrote in The Courageous Police Leader, it is the same exact thing that if you read it 5 years earlier, it hasn't changed. You still have those poor law enforcement leaders in place. They may be new because they've come up through the ranks and they've been mentored by other poor law enforcement leaders. It doesn't matter, if you're in California or you're in Maine. It doesn't matter. It's the same exact poor leadership. They're puppets. They're political puppets because they want to get a job at Perth afterwards. They want to get a job at IACP. They want to turn around and be consultants. They want those $1 million contracts. I'll give you an example. A former police chief of mine, former deputy police chief of mine, left my agency, went and became a police chief down in North Carolina. Left that position, and now his whole role is to monitor consent decrees. He makes $750,000 a year going to law enforcement agencies that are under consent decrees, and goes in there and just basically shakes the snow globe and goes, "You're doing everything wrong. You're not adhering to this consent decree," because there's no standard. It can change and vary from day to day, and you can never get off of it, like you said. So his job, his salary is indefinite, and that's what these folks do. I
know they probably have a nice beach house and a nice car, but they'll be judged for that one day. I agree. It's so disgusting, and and there's a lot to blame here. Like, I'm in the leadership space. I do speaking and writing in this. Who else is talking about this? You can bring your John Maxwell memes all day long, right? And motivate your audience with your war stories. But if you're not talking about these issues, you aren't a leadership guru. What are you talking about? You're a wolf, man. You're just part of the problem, So
but we see that
ourselves. We can blame the DOJ, and we can blame the activists, and we can blame the attorney. We're making these decisions inside police departments. It's our fault.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing is like, you turn on like 2019 when we started, doing podcasting and stuff. There were a lot of cop podcasts out there. It was more geared towards, look at my new Streamlight flashlight, and look at this Gore-Tex jacket, and war stories and stuff. You didn't have a lot of people really peeling back the layers or pulling back the curtain on Oz and saying, "Look what's going on." I feel like that's happening more now. I feel like there are more cop podcasts out there that are not afraid to turn around and say, "I was at this department. It was fucked up. This is the reasons why." And it's not bitching. There's a fine line between that bitching and really peeling back the curtain and kind of giving a view to people that are not in law enforcement, ones that want to hear.
Right.
You have the purple and blue haired freaks out there that are not going to listen to no matter what the fuck you say. Like they just don't care. But the ones
Right.
that actually want to learn about why recruitment is down, why crime is high, those are the ones that, I feel like there's more shows out there that are finally doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I
But
just came back from the Michigan Association of Chiefs Police Conference, and it was a big deal because on one hand, I've been speaking for 15 years, 25 years on the road, and I've been to less than 3 or 4 of chief conferences, right? And so I did a little keynote there, and the association guy came up to me and he goes, "This is the problem with leadership in law enforcement." He goes, "You know what? Most chiefs don't want to hear any of this." He goes,
No.
he goes, "Now, we loved it, man. This was great. It's what we needed to hear." He said,
Oh,
"But
good.
most chiefs associations and most chiefs groups, they do not want to hear this. And if we don't talk about our problems, I mean, we're never going to solve them. I mean, Mark, if you go to the doctor after this show and he goes, 'We're going to start chemotherapy next week,' you're going to be like, 'What are you talking about?' No, he's going to tell you about the problem, and then he's going
Right.
to talk about solutions. So we have an entire profession, for the most part, that they don't want to ever talk about the problems because they're too busy getting their rotator cuff injuries by patting themselves on the back, right? We have to talk about the
Right.
problems to solve the problems. And so I get called all kinds of names, radical and this. I'm like, well, show me where I'm wrong. No one has
Right.
done it yet, but
Well,
it's an easy way to dismiss what I'm saying just by calling me names, right? And so it's just really ridiculous.
you're in good company, man. Like, you're in great company. I mean,
Yeah.
me answering fucking comments on social media has grown into like a part-time job.
Yeah.
The union had a little local paper there, which is, I mean, the Phoenix media is like most media. They're not really media, they're propaganda. But when this
Right.
report dropped, I mean, this is research. I mean, this wasn't just some editorial, like it was pure research. And they said, okay, we may do a story on this. Well, I don't know. You talked about us bad for 3 years based on this lie. Maybe you should do a story on this. And they came back and they said, well, Travis wrote this article one time that's, I mean, I can imagine going through the hundreds of things I've written in my life. And he wrote this article one time that said the media raised an assassin when Donald Trump was, assassination attempt, which the article was about this, 19-year-old kid that was 9 years old when Trump came down the escalator. And why would he think this about Donald Trump? Well, it's the media. And she goes, and because he did this, it's too controversial for us. And I'm like,
Right.
Well, it's true, number one, but number two, you would never talk about this story because if you talk about my report, you're going to tell your whole audience you lied to them for 3 years. And so
Yes.
it's just, but it's the media's going to do what they're going to do. I really blame the decision makers. I mean, Republicans are on the hook for this. They have a chance to get rid of this god awful thing, and they're choosing not to.
Yeah. And that's on multiple different fronts too.
But guys, listen, we could talk about the pie of consent decrees and what these chiefs are doing, but that goes into a bunch of different areas. I mean, they're making decisions that are literally killing officers right now, and they know it. And they know it. I can prove that. It's insanity. This whole de-escalation thing and all this stuff
There you
that we're
go.
being force-fed. These
Good
chiefs are
shift.
making these decisions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. I can tell you when this whole de-escalation thing came up, I'm old school. I'm an old bull, and I recognize that, especially by the time I was retired. And my chief at the time he put that de-escalation on like a coat and wore it. You just need to be more patient. And I'm a CIT officer. I get that. And in that incident, yeah, but you got some drunk guy behind the bar. I'm not going to be that way. I'm going to ask you. I'm going to tell you. And then you're going to do it.
They start off with the false premise that if you have to use force, that it's somehow your fault, not the behavior of the suspect. And this was sort of getting in high gear. I left 3 years ago and I started seeing it. But the first thing I thought is, I'm like, well, we've always de-escalated. Every cop has chosen not to shoot somebody they could have. Every cop has chosen to not use the force they probably should have, because inherently we don't want to have to do that, right? That's why you're recruited to be a police officer. You don't have violent tendencies. And so I thought it was odd, but follow the money, follow where the grants are, follow all the money being made. And so, but at the same time, I got to talk about this, gentlemen, because this is actually, people listening, you need to tune into this right here, because this could affect you. So I've taught this class called Seconds for Survival. Mark, I think you may have been to it, but it's a pre-attack indicator class. I've taught it for 10, 15 years, but in my mind, it was always just a fun class to teach. I wasn't taking it that seriously, but it's a pretty dynamic class with good videos, but it shows all the things that happen before violence and kind of what to do about it. Because every cop knows that before someone attacks you, they're doing certain things, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you know the attacks about everybody knows that. And we call
Yes, sir.
call that human behaviors and this and that, pre-incident indicators, but everybody knows that. But so I was teaching this, and frankly, it was the most popular class I had. I'm like, well, I can come, but let me stay at day 2 and teach leadership. You know, because no cop wants to teach leadership because they're working for some guy that's been to leadership training. And they're like, I don't want the leadership stuff. But obviously, we do some different stuff. So I was
Right.
doing this class, and I get a call almost a year ago. It was a lawyer out of Omaha, Nebraska, and he says to me, he goes, I've got a deputy here. It's a young deputy, and he's being prosecuted for manslaughter. And he goes, I'm looking for an expert in this case. Now, I do a fair bit of civil expert work, but I've never done criminal before. And he tells me the story, and essentially the story is a crazy pursuit. Guy stops the car in the middle of the interstate, and he starts doing all these behaviors. Coming to find out, it was possibly suicide by cop based on his girlfriend's interview. But when you look at his behaviors, it was that prototypical. He's coming out of the car like he's got a weapon. He's reaching in the back seat. He's coming up, and at one point he's got an object in his hand, and the officer's doing a felony stop, and he keeps telling the guy. I mean, this goes over amount of time, and the officer on the radio felt so much that he had a gun. He went on the radio and he said, "I think he's got a gun." You know, he's looking through the back window, but he sees this object, and then he sees him kind of bending over like he's loading a gun. He's verbalizing all this, and so he's staying back. He's doing everything tactically right, and the backing officer comes rolling up. The backing officer gets out, you know, gun up, get out of the car, and this guy's. If you saw the video, you've never seen a video with this much behavior cues that this guy potentially has a weapon. So every cop seeing it would go, yeah, he's got a weapon. The backing officer comes up and he immediately goes, I see a gun. He's got a gun. And that's all the officer needed to know. He eliminated the threat. Come to find out it wasn't a gun. It was a butcher knife, and he was stabbing himself in his heart. That's another reason why you might think it's suicide by cop. Pretty good evidence there. And but when you look at the totality of circumstances and the behavior of the suspect, whether he had a gun or not, as we all know, the Supreme Court does not mention whether a gun's involved or not. They just talk about, you know, fear for your life or totality of circumstances, what would a reasonable officer do. And it goes to the sheriff, and they cleared the officer. Really, you know, honestly, if I showed it to 100 cops, 99 would go, yeah, you know, it wasn't that big of a deal. But you know the story. DA takes it to a grand jury. And because DA wouldn't just go, oh, yeah, it looks, you know, I understand civil law too. I understand this. And the sheriff said this. No, they take it to a grand jury where you can indict a ham sandwich, right? You can pretty much get to dictate the case. You don't get to put on a defense. And they indicted this kid for manslaughter, looking at 20 years in prison for illegal justified shooting. And I get contacted about this, and I hear this story, and I go, hey, listen, obviously you need an expert. I said, but I know some of the best use of force folks out there. You know, I'm force science certified, but I know some of the best guys. Let me put you in touch with some of them. And he says, oh, I have a use of force expert. And I'm like, well, why'd you just waste 30 minutes of my time? He goes, for your attack indicators. He goes, don't you teach this class? And I go, well, yeah, I teach this little old class, but why are you calling me? He goes, you're the guy. Everyone tells me to call you. And I'm like, well, that's a problem. If I'm the expert in this category, that's a problem. And I started doing some research, and sure enough, this training gentleman has been leaving the profession. They're not teaching people this anymore. You know, when I first started teaching the class 10, 15 years ago, people would say, thanks for the great reminder and blah, blah, blah. I got this in the academy. Well, I had kids come up to me in recent years going, I never heard of this. What we did is we replaced that with this de-escalation stuff where if someone's acting out about to commit violence against you, you're supposed to just talk like you're Chick-fil-A, and that somehow will reverse the violence. And so this led me down this path of, well, I need to put together this trainer program and train a bunch of people up because I cannot believe this. Right. Well, then I had a kid come up to me after a class, and he said, I love this. You tied it to case law, but he said, but if I do this, my chief will fire me. And he's right. If some chiefs, just like this kid, gets prosecuted for doing this. And so then I decided, I have my doctorate degree, which I don't recommend to anybody, but the one thing it did teach me was
we should be calling you doctor.
Yeah, it makes you dumber. But I can, other people know this, but a lot of research has been taken over by politics. But I can read research and I can know whether it's valid or not. And so I go, well, I'm just going to dive into the research, and I'll be able to basically validate that these certain behaviors cause this type of violence. Well, this is what's kept me up for the last 6 months working on this project. Is it doesn't exist. Think about all of these national organizations and defensive tactics groups, and all these
Mhm.
people smarter than me. No
Right.
one decided that there's so many cops dying that we should actually go in with research and give law enforcement the actual behaviors to be very concerned about. Now, we all know the behaviors to be concerned about.
Right.
Won't stop you from getting indicted, won't stop a chief from firing you, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so at the same time I find this, gentlemen, I find that we're the only profession that hasn't done this. There is peer-reviewed, validated research from EMTs to clinicians to doctors to corrections officers. They have done this, and we haven't done it in law enforcement. And then at the same time, I'm seeing how we're going, our line of duty deaths are down, our line of duty deaths are down, and violence is down around the country. But meanwhile, since 2020, every year, attacks on law enforcement have increased to 2024, the last year I've dated, to a record. When I started teaching this class 10 plus years ago, I would say something like 35,000 cops were assaulted last year, according to the FBI, although only about half the departments participate. We got to do better.
Right.
It was 85,000 in 2024. So you have, at the same time, line of duty deaths are coming down, and at the same time they say homicide and violence is coming down in this country,
Right.
you have increases every year for law enforcement's being assaulted. And I'm like, no one's talking about this? Why is this? Well, everybody in law enforcement listening to this knows why this is. You've seen the videos. Just go to YouTube and watch. You've seen the officers that are facing a deadly situation talking like they're from Chick-fil-A because some idiot government grant instructor that's about 89 years old making $5,000 a day is telling them in their de-escalation class that this is what you do. And so that led me down a path of de-escalation. And guess what? Most people don't know this. Do you know there's no validated research to support it? In fact, the research I found says that there needs to be more research. Now, here's my theory.
Oh, yeah.
They can't do deep research on it because it doesn't work. By the way, if de-escalation, you just said, Mark, earlier that your chief wore this de-escalation as a badge of honor or whatever, right?
Mhm. Yep.
A lot of chiefs do that because the conferences tell them to do this and the
Oh,
politicians
yeah.
tell them to do this. Well, if it worked, where are the videos? Where are the body cams of it working? I mean,
Exactly.
think about it. The thousands of body camera videos out there. Where's look at our de-escalation training in action. Look at it working. Look at this violent suspect that decides to make the right decision. The truth is, it doesn't work. We've taken de-escalation that is a valid concept. I don't want to throw this out, but it's a valid concept for non-violent individuals.
Yes.
I have not found one example of a violent individual with violent intentions that was de-escalated. And so this is permeated throughout the entire profession, and it's created the most risk that our officers have ever faced in generations. I mean, you see the reports, you see the officers shot, you see the attacks. The numbers don't lie. All-time high in 2024 of officers assaulted, and we're waiting on 25 data as I speak. And so no one's talking about this. Nobody. And you and I both know that and by the way, this is de-escalation. If I see somebody scanning or putting their hands in their pockets and I go get handcuffs on them real quick, I just de-escalated a potentially violent encounter. But that's not what officers are being taught in de-escalation. Gentlemen, I'll tell you one quick story because this is what really made me decide to do this. And I've actually gone in and I've done it. I'm working towards peer-reviewed validation right now on the behaviors. I went back 5 years for every public domain video in law enforcement. It's taken me months, and I have got Excel spreadsheets like crazy that have listed all the behaviors before the attack. And I can tell you right now that if people knew this and acted upon it, we would save so many lives and so many assaults. And it's coming against the sacred cow, de-escalation. Okay, that's what it's going to do. But there will be departments that want to. Listen, I know I'm going all over the place, but I was so bothered by what I found, gentlemen. I started calling some high-level leaders around the country that I knew were like us. They believe. And I don't want to give away this gentleman's name because it would, he asked me to be sort of anonymous about it, but he was the number 2 guy in charge at the largest highway patrol in the country. But anyway, he tells me when I showed him my data, I showed him this stuff, what I just described. And he says to me, and this is the guy that's behind the scenes. He's in the conference rooms. He's on boards. He goes, Travis, the chiefs know it. Well, what do you mean they know it? He goes, they know what they're doing is hurting cops. They know it. He said, but they are choosing to make third-party entities happy and make people think they're doing something about it, but they know it's increasing use of force. They know it's increasing injury. And I as part of my research as I went in after George Floyd died, about 12 states passed these mandatory de-escalation laws and mandatory, use force as a last resort, which by the way, the FBI data says that's one of the traits that gets officers killed if you wait too long to use force. I have the data on that. I think Ohio may have been one of them, but I only found the actual data in a couple of states. And 4 states I found that actually listed officer injuries and use of force annually. They all went up significantly post 2021 when they passed these bills. So the state of Virginia, use of force went up 100%, officer injury went up 100%. South Bend, Indiana, that department passed that mandatory stuff and then posted those numbers went up 64%. And so we're literally passing these laws and passing legislation, doing policies that will increase officer injury, will increase. And no one's saying this. Like if you were a chief and you did some crazy language outside of Graham v. Connor and you made these officers do this stuff, would you not evaluate that after the fact? Well, then none of them are. It's increasing injuries. It's increasing this stuff. And so what this research is going to do, I believe, is it's going to give officers a chance to survive because no one else is getting a chance to survive. And we're rolling out I just taught the first training class. We're rolling out an 8-hour training class. We're rolling out a 40-hour certification class to where people can get certified in this. It's called FOCUS, Field Observable Cues for Unknown Situations. And it's the first validated safety system for law enforcement when it comes to this. And systems are not unique to us, gentlemen. We've got the STOPS program. We have the ALERT program. Those are all started from research. So, but when it comes to violent attacks, it's the first system that's ever in existence. Actually, the research is about to go to the journals now. You ought to be, these journals don't want to publish it. It goes against everything that they're talking about, right?
But I think with that, a lot of it is that you're talking about officer deaths coming down. I think officer deaths are coming down because the medical profession is getting so much better at saving their lives. They're all going to do de-escalation because no one wants to have that big ugly scene or body camera or cell phone camera. But let's face facts, guys. Use of force ain't pretty. None of it's pretty. Yeah. But at the same time, you have to maintain your law and order. I really feel that the same people that come up with de-escalation are also the people that says, hey, you have this ugly resin capsicum, so before you use it, you got to take a good shot to the face. Or, hey, look at this new taser, but before you use it, you need to take a ride to lightning. So I kind of see why some of that, okay, so I get sprayed in the face with OC, I don't die, and I can still fight. Got it. I should ride the taser to understand that I can feel the pain of it and I can fight through it if it's ever used against me. Okay, I kind of got that. But where I'm coming back to this is maybe some sick son of a bitch is like, you know what, if we tell these guys to stand with their hands in their pockets, maybe some of our thugs that we've let out of jail will punch these fuckers in the face and I can sit up and pleasure myself to the fact that I made that happen. So people don't like to think that the world is that way, but I've seen that firsthand. Those dark people that do that. And I'm telling you, I 100% agree with you that de-escalation is getting cops severely hurt. Not getting them killed, but you're getting them hurt. And for that reason, they're talking about lack of people to work. Why are you standing there letting your cops get work and going out and injury?
Well, and like I said, de-escalation works in some instances, but not when people are acting out violently with these behaviors. And I'll give you an example. So 5 years of data, gentlemen, this is for officers listening to this. This can help you right now. In every incident where an officer was shot or shot at, and we're going back 5 years, by the way, no one's done, that's kind of crazy. All of the video footage and body cameras we have now, no one's gone back and looked at this. It blows. I should not be doing this, gentlemen. I think it's God ordained. I don't know why I'm the one doing it, but I'm going to be seeing it through. But in that data set of an officer being shot or shot at, 91% of the time before they were shot, there was an amplifier involved. And here's what an amplifier is in the training. Amplifier is information you knew before you even got there. This is a more tactical call for you. Man with a gun, domestic violence, things like that. So they knew 91% of the time before they got there that this is not just a regular call, but they got there oftentimes and then acted like it was just a regular call because we're so scared of, of being too aggressive. And then in 100% of the times, you can combine amplifier with non-compliance. So what does that tell me? You don't even have to take the class to know this. If you get an amplifier call, and we get those every day, and you get there and you immediately get non-compliance, you better stop your de-escalation and get them under control. Because what comes next, you're not going to like. And by the way, in all this data set, I did not find one de-escalation event. I would talk about it. If de-escalation worked, I'd be training that. Not one. So I would say, if this works so well, show me the videos. No one is showing me the videos. I think this is a scam that's getting cops killed that nobody's wanting to talk about.
Exactly. And that's leading me back to the people that's trying to manipulate and direct police departments that don't know anything about
Mark,
it. Don't know anything.
Here's the last crazy stat I'll give you. And by the way, if anyone's interested in this training, the website is actually going up in a few weeks, but I'll just go to my website, travisyates.org, and send me a message. You'll be the first to know. But it's going to be online based. I'll come to your department. I just did it a few weeks ago to the department, but it'll all be online based. I'm probably going to roll out the initial class for free to everybody. But if you want to be the trainer that takes this around your department and makes sure people goes home at night, you'll have that opportunity. But man, I'm so bothered. I forgot what I was going to say. So I'll tell you, man. Here's how nuts it is. I gave you the stats on amplifier and noncompliance. 28% of the time, the suspect verbally said something for the officer knew it was coming. We call that a declaration in the training. So they said, "I'm not going to jail. You're going to have to kill me." Everybody's seen these videos, and the officer's reactions more often than not are no big deal. So they're literally verbally telling us almost 1/3 of the time, "I'm about to attack you," and we're not responding to it.
Right.
I don't blame the officers, gentlemen. These officers are scared to death of their chief. They're scared to death of their policy. They see the de-escalations plastered everywhere. They just need to know if you use that inappropriately, and most of the time we are, you're putting yourself in life in jeopardy for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And then they got that latest FOP poll to come out that where most of the members polled were saying that they mistrust their own management more than the people on the street. And I had been saying that for years. I can deal with a guy on the street with a gun. I know the terms. What I can't deal with is a lack of support or admin betrayal. After I'm out doing my job, I'm trying to keep my crew safe, or I'm keeping myself safe so I can go home to my family. And then one of these policy guys like, "Oh, well, you violated this policy, so we're going to hem you up for doing your job." Or they go through there like they do sometimes and just like, "Oh, well, this fits. Let's charge administratively with this." They're just trying to come up with a lunch list of misconduct that simply didn't exist.
Gentlemen, I'll be honest, I don't want to be doing this, but this is life or death. And I will promise you that if people get this and get certified and get trained the trainer, you will know more than the top one. I mean, you would not believe the information that's in here. And it's going to blow your mind. And it's been a crazy lift, but I'm looking forward to just putting it out there and letting people do what they do, because I think it's generational. I think we're so backwards right now on safety that if we could just implement this aspect of it, which is an aspect we all know. We all know what pre-attack indicators are. We just don't know what to do. And we're going to give them real validated measures, how to document it. We have actually a focused risk behavioral score to where there's not that we want that they're going to do math, but when it gets to a certain point level, you have to take action, and you can document that in your report. And then if you want to fire an officer or you want to discipline an officer or prosecute an officer, we have the science behind it that they followed, and we'll be able to protect them.
Yeah. Well, we are at time. It always goes very, very quickly with you, Travis. We have to have you on again very shortly. Let's not wait a year. It's been absolutely amazing. Please plug whatever you would like for folks to go to. I'm going to put your travisyates.org up on the screen right now, but take it away, Travis.
Yeah, I mean, we do stuff all the time. The best way to follow that is if you go to travisyates.org, you can put your email in there, but I don't do much with that. But if you go to the article link, we do weekly articles, and you can subscribe on Substack to that. We do weekly podcasts. You can go to any podcast platform, type in Courageous Leadership, Travis Yates. It's going to pop up. Subscribe to that. So we're doing regular stuff, because I can't count how many times I would go to a class in law enforcement. Like, that's all right. But then you just get on with life and you forget about it. So what we try to do is we put content out constantly to talk about this. And I had a real big problem with going into the tactical stuff and the behavior stuff. I'm like, I'm a leadership guy. But then I kind of figured out that is leadership. Man, it's the most
Yes.
important aspect of leadership. And so we sort of mix and match both of those messages, how to be a courageous leader and then how to survive.
Yeah. And folks, if you haven't checked out Travis's book, one, you're an idiot. But two,
Well, that's funny because my chief called me that when I wrote it. So I guess it all comes full circle.
yeah, I've been called similar. But I mean, I truly do mean this. It was life altering reading
Amen.
that book. It came in my hands at the right exact time, and changed the trajectory of where my career and my life went. So, and I don't say that very lightly because I have tons of books that folks send me. Sometimes I read them. I'm more audio than anything. But this is the real deal. Travis has been a friend of ours for a very, very long time. So do us a favor, like and share this episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in on YouTube and the Rumble. We are growing exponentially. We appreciate it. And take good care of each other.
Thank you,
Oh,
gentlemen.
damn. Mark, I forgot to have you sign us out. I'm so sorry. I just completely.
Did you end us?
Yeah, I did.
No, that's all right. You want to turn back on? We don't have to. We can keep rolling.
Yeah. Man, I mean, I'm very serious. We almost have to probably schedule something for like